The desert wind carries secrets across the sands of time, whispering stories of a world that lives on in the golden light of memory. There is a river that flows not just through a valley, but through the very center of human history, a ribbon of life winding through an ancient, endless silence. Here, the sun is not merely a star, but a god returning home, and the rhythm of the water matches the slow, steady beating of a sleeping heart. Welcome to a quiet space where the noise of the present day fades into the silence of the past. You are safe here, resting in a sanctuary of your own making, perhaps with heavy eyes or the weight of the day finally lifting from your shoulders. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be, and no history to memorize. We are simply drifting back to observe the gentle current of a life lived thousands of years ago. If this journey into the quiet corners of history brings you peace, you may gently signal your presence by subscribing or leaving a soft word in the comments. It is a small way to stay connected to these nightly voyages, a simple nod before we drift further into the dark. Now, let the darkness around you become the warm velvet night of the desert, and let your breathing slow to the pace of the great Nile River. We are traveling back 5,000 years to a moment just before dawn, where the sky is turning a deep, bruising purple above the horizon. The air is cool, holding the lingering chill of the desert night. In the silence, a civilization is beginning to stir, not with the jarring noise of machinery, but with the soft, organic sounds of life waking up in harmony with the sun. The light begins as a faint promise in the east, touching the flat roofs of mud brick homes that cluster together like sleeping giants. These walls are thick and cool, designed by hands that understood how to tame the fierce heat of the day. Inside, the air is still and heavy with sleep. The first movement comes from the hearth. In the dim light, the rhythmic sound of stone against stone begins, a low, grounding hum that signals the start of the morning. It is the grinding of emmer wheat and barley, a task performed in the quiet gray hours to avoid the midday sun. This is not just labor, but a daily ritual of survival, the creation of bread that will anchor every meal to come. The scent of yeast and flour begins to drift through the small, high windows, mixing with the crisp morning air. As the sky brightens to a pale gold, the household awakens to the ritual of water. There is no rush here, only the deliberate pouring of cool water from large clay jars. This water has traveled from the river, carried by hand, precious and life-giving. Cleanliness is a form of godliness here, a way to purify the body before facing the world. They cleanse their skin and tend to their mouths with frayed twigs from the Salvadora tree, a natural brush that tastes of the earth. Then comes the application of the eyes. In the soft light of a bronze mirror, a small stick dips into a vessel of dark coal. The line is drawn carefully around the eyes, a stark black wing against the skin. This is not vanity, but protection. It shields the eyes from the glare of the coming sun and wards off the unseen spirits of the air. It is a moment of focus, a private ceremony performed by both men and women, marking the transition from the vulnerability of sleep to the readiness of the day. Breakfast is a quiet affair, taken as the sun finally breaches the horizon, casting long shadows across the floor. For the wealthy, there are figs, sweet dates, and cheeses, accompanied by the remains of yesterday's roasted meats. For the farmer, the meal is simpler, coarse bread and onions, washed down with thick, nourishing beer that tastes of grain and sustenance. But regardless of the table, the meal is eaten with gratitude, for the sun has returned, and with it, the blessing of Ra. The heat has not yet settled, the world is fresh, and the morning breeze off the Nile smells of wet reeds and fertile mud. The work of the day begins while the air is still forgiving. For the vast majority, the rhythm of life is dictated by the soil and the water. The farmers walk to the fields, their bare feet moving over the cool earth. They carry wooden hoes and sickles, tools that feel like extensions of their own arms. The work is slow and steady. There is the sound of the plow breaking the soil, the soft splash of water being lifted from the canals to the thirsty crops. They work in time with the seasons, the season of the flood, the season of planting, the season of harvest. They are not fighting the land, but moving with it, understanding that the river gives and the river takes. When the sun climbs high and the heat becomes a heavy blanket, they retreat to the shade of sycamore trees, resting their bodies, waiting for the mercy of the afternoon breeze. In the city, the sounds are different, but the pace is equally measured. In the workshops, the air is filled with the scent of cedar dust and heating metal. Carpenters shape wood imported from distant lands, their bronze chisels tapping softly. They are crafting chairs and chests that will last for eternity, objects of beauty meant to travel with their owners into the afterlife. Every joint is fitted with patience, every surface is smoothed to perfection. There is a spiritual weight to their craft. A small shrine sits in the corner of the workshop, a place to offer a silent prayer to Ptah, the architect of the world, asking for steady hands and clear vision. Further along the river, the scribes sit cross-legged, their white linen kilts bright against the shadows of the colonnade. The air here smells of dry papyrus and ink. The only sound is the scratching of a reed pen and the rustle of a scroll unfurling. They are the keepers of memory, recording the flow of grain, the height of the river, the laws of the king. They dip their pens into water and cakes of soot, writing in a script that is both art and language. It is a life of quiet discipline, years of study, culminating in the ability to freeze time with ink, to capture the voice of a generation on a fragile sheet of plant fiber. The river itself is a highway of liquid glass. Boats with curved hulls drift downstream, their sails furled, carried only by the current. Others struggle upstream, their square sails catching the north wind. They carry gold from the south, timber from the north, and grain from the fertile banks of the river. The boatmen know the river like a living being. They know where the sandbars hide and where the crocodiles sleep. The water laps gently against the wood, a hypnotic, ceaseless rhythm that ties the entire kingdom together. Commerce here is a conversation, a slow negotiation of value, bread for copper, linen for oil, measured out in weights and agreements, recorded by the watchful scribes. As the sun begins its long descent into the west, the intensity of the light softens. The harsh white glare turns to a warm amber, painting the limestone cliffs in shades of orange and pink. The work slows, the tools are cleaned and put away. The people return from the fields and the workshops, their bodies tired, but their spirits lifting with the coming evening. The heat lifts from the land, leaving behind a comfortable warmth. This is the time for community, for the gathering of families on the flat roofs of their homes, high above the dust of the street. The evening meal is prepared, the fires are lit,
and the smell of roasting duck or baking bread rises into the twilight. It is a time for storytelling. The old gather the young and speak of the gods, of Osiris and Isis, of the journey the sun must take through the underworld each night. They play games, moving pieces across a board of squares called Senet, a game of strategy that mirrors the passage of the soul. There is music, faint and sweet, the plucking of a harp, the breathy notes of a flute drifting from a neighbor's courtyard. Laughter floats on the air, soft and easy. The day's labor is done, and the night belongs to the family. Darkness falls completely, and the sky becomes a vast canopy of diamonds. The ancient Egyptians looked up
As the individual breath slows to match the rhythm of the night, the great artery of the land continues its silent work. Out on the dark water of the Nile, the world is not entirely asleep. A single wooden boat drifts on the current, guided by a boatman who knows the river better than he knows the lines of his own hand. There is no moon tonight, only the vast spray of stars reflecting on the obsidian surface of the water. He navigates by the feel of the current against the rudder and the distant, shadowy outline of the palm trees on the bank. The silence here is profound, broken only by the soft lap of water against the cedar hull. He carries goods from the south, perhaps jars of oil or bundles of linen, moving them through the coolness of the night to avoid the heat of the coming day. It is a solitary journey, peaceful and slow, a movement through a void of quiet darkness where the water and the sky seem to merge into one endless expanse. This river is the clock by which all life is set. The passage of time in this ancient place is not measured in hours or minutes, but in the slow, inevitable rise and fall of the water. Beneath the sleeping earth, the seasons turn with a heavy, predictable grace. There is a time when the waters swell, turning the valley into a vast, shallow lake reflecting the heavens. This is not a chaotic flood, but a gentle, rising embrace. The water creeps up the banks, inch by inch, day by day, bringing with it the dark, fertile silt from mountains far away. In the villages, the people wait with patience. They watch the markers cut into the stone of the riverbanks, reading the height of the water like a message from the gods. When the land is submerged, the farming stops, and a different quiet settles over the valley. It is a time of resting for the earth, a deep inhale before the exertion of growth begins again. During these long cycles, the community moves together like a flock of birds turning in the sky. There are no shouted orders, only the silent understanding of neighbors who have lived on the same patch of earth for generations. When the waters recede, leaving behind the wet, glistening mud, the coordination of the planting begins. It is a delicate dance of cooperation. The irrigation canals, dug by hand and lined with clay, must be opened and closed at the precise moment to guide the water to the waiting fields. A farmer stands by a small sluice gate, watching the flow. He knows that the water passing his field is destined for his neighbor further down the slope. There is a profound trust here, a social contract written not on papyrus, but in the movement of the water itself. To block the flow is to break the order of the world. So the water is shared, a silver ribbon passing from hand to hand, binding the village together in a web of mutual survival. In the quiet courtyards of the healers and the wise women, another kind of preservation takes place. The air here is thick with the scent of dried herbs, crushing mint, coriander, and the resinous tang of frankincense. While the rest of the house sleeps, a healer might be awake, tending to the small jars that line the shelves. She works by the light of a single oil lamp, the flame casting long, dancing shadows against the wall. Her hands move slowly, grinding ingredients in a stone mortar. She knows the secrets of the plants that grow along the riverbank, the roots that soothe a fever, and the leaves that ease the pain of a long day's labor. This knowledge is old, passed down in whispers from mother to daughter, a quiet science of care. She prepares a salve of honey and fat, sealing it in a jar for the morning. Her work is a silent vigil against suffering, a way to maintain the balance of the body, just as the pharaoh maintains the balance of the stars. Deep within the temples, behind walls of stone so thick they dampen all sound from the outside world, the passage of the night is marked by the priests. They are the watchers of the sky. On the roof of the temple, a figure stands motionless, eyes tracing the slow arc of the constellations. They know the stars as old friends, greeting the rising of Sirius that heralds the coming of the flood. Down below, in the cool archives, the scent is of dry papyrus and dust. Scrolls are stacked in niches like sleeping souls, holding the records of years past. Here, the scribes have documented the height of every flood, the yield of every harvest, the movement of every grain sack. It is a library of order. In the stillness, one can almost hear the collective memory of the civilization breathing, preserved in ink and fiber, safe from the chaos of the desert wind. As the night deepens toward its center, the temperature drops and the desert exhales the last of the day's heat. The silence stretches out, covering the palaces of the kings and the huts of the brickmakers with the same heavy blanket. In this stillness, the boundaries of the self begin to blur. The sleeper is no longer just a farmer or a merchant. They are a part of the vast, breathing organism of the valley. The wind picks up slightly, rustling the tops of the date palms, a sound like dry rain. It carries the smell of the distant sea to the north and the dry, ancient dust of the deep desert to the west. These are the two infinities that frame their world, the endless water and the endless sand. Between them, life is a narrow, precious strip of green, held in place by the will of the water and the labor of the people. Even the objects in the room seem to hold a quiet awareness. The wooden headrest, the linen sheets, the clay water jars sweating in the cool air. They are all crafted with purpose and care. They are silent witnesses to the continuity of life. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again. The sun will rise, the bread will be baked, the water will be drawn. But for now, there is only the waiting. There is a sense of deep, abiding security in this repetition. The sun has risen for millions of mornings, and it will rise for millions more. There is no need to rush, no need to worry. The universe is in order. The gods are in their places. The river is flowing. And so the night drifts on, carrying the dreams of a civilization on its back. The shadows lengthen and merge, erasing the sharp lines of the day. The world becomes a place of soft edges and muted tones. To rest here is to float in a space outside of time, where the struggles of the daylight hours are small and distant. You are simply watching from the shore of a dark, slow-moving stream, letting the current take everything that is heavy, everything that is loud, and carry it away into the deep, welcoming silence of the ancient past. Far beyond the reach of the river water, the desert stretches out into the darkness like a sleeping ocean of sand. Here, the silence is different. It is vast and dry, untouched by the humidity of the valley. The wind travels over dunes that have not moved for centuries, shaping them with a slow, invisible hand. In this deep expanse, a small caravan has stopped for the night, huddled in the lee of a limestone outcrop. The fire they built at dusk has burned down to glowing embers, casting a faint, pulsing red light against the rocks. The travelers are wrapped in heavy wool against the desert chill, their breathing synchronized with the slow, steady exhales of their donkeys tethered nearby. There is a sense of immense distance here. The city is days away, a memory of noise and stone. Here there is only the sky, pressing down with its weight of stars, and the ground, cooling rapidly under the open heavens. The isolation is not lonely, it is peaceful, a reminder of the quietude that existed before cities were built, a silence that will remain long after they are gone. Closer to the cliffs that border the valley, the great stone quarries lie dormant. This is a place of heavy, grounded stillness. The white limestone faces of the rock glow faintly in the starlight, ghostly and pale. During the day, this place rings with the sound of copper chisels and wooden mallets, the dust rising in choking clouds. But now, the dust has settled, coating the ground in a fine, soft powder that muffles every footstep. Blocks of stone, half cut from the earth, sit waiting in the shadows. They are massive, geometric shapes rising out of the chaotic rock, suspended in the moment of their creation. The tools of the masons lie resting beside them, heavy and still. There is a feeling of patience in the stone. It has waited millions of years to be shaped. It can wait through the night. The unfinished statues, still trapped within the bedrock, seem to sleep with the people, their forms only half realized, dreaming of the temples they will one day support. Drifting north, where the river widens and slows, the landscape changes into the lush, tangled world of the marshlands. The air here is thick and sweet, smelling of wet earth and green growth. The papyrus reeds grow tall and dense, forming a living wall that whispers constantly in the breeze. In the darkness, the water is a maze of hidden channels and still pools. The birds of the river have settled into their nests among the swaying stalks, their heads tucked under wings. A frog calls out, a low, resonant note that ripples through the air, followed by a long silence. The water lilies have closed their petals tight, hiding their gold centers until the return of the sun. Beneath the surface of the dark water, fish hang suspended in the gentle current, their fins moving just enough to hold their place. It is a hidden world, a secret garden of water and shadow, where life continues its slow, rhythmic pulse unseen by human eyes. In the heart of the city, within the high walls of a noble's estate, a garden sleeps in refined order. The chaos of the wild marsh is tamed here, arranged in precise rectangles and straight lines. A rectangular pool reflects the stars, its surface unbroken by wind. Palm trees stand in neat rows, their fronds acting like sentinels guarding the peace of the house. The scent of jasmine and blue lotus hangs heavy in the air, intensified by the cool of the night. It is a place of retreat. A wooden bench sits empty beneath a sycamore tree, the shadows of the leaves painting intricate shifting patterns on the ground. The house itself is silent, its windows dark. Inside, the air is cool and still, protected by thick mud brick walls that hold the memory of the earth. The silence here feels constructed, deliberate, a sanctuary carved out of the noise of existence. Deep within the sleeping quarters, a weaving loom stands in the corner of a room, a silent silhouette against a plastered wall. The shuttle rests between the threads, the work paused in the middle of a row. The linen on the frame is tight and smooth, a testament to hours of patient labor. In the dimness, the threads look like rays of light captured and spun. There is a connection here to the fates, to the weaving of time itself. The cloth is unfinished, just as the night is unfinished. It waits for the return of the hand, for the rhythm of the work to resume. But for now, the tension in the thread is relaxed. The dust motes dance slowly in the dark air, settling gently on the wooden frame. The object feels timeless, a tool that has existed in one form or another as long as people have needed warmth and covering. It stands as a promise that work will return, but rest is necessary. Above it all, the sky continues its slow, majestic rotation. The ancient Egyptians watched these stars with reverence, naming them the imperishable ones because they never set, never dipped below the horizon to die in the west. They are the anchors of the night, circling the pole in an eternal, perfect dance. To lie looking up at them is to feel the stability of the universe. The constellations are not random. They are stories written in light, grand and unmoving. They look down on the sleeping farmers, the resting pharaohs, and the quiet desert with the same cold, beautiful indifference. The light from these stars has traveled across unthinkable distances to touch the sleeping valley, a connection between the mortal earth and the eternal infinite. The transition from deep night toward the earliest suggestion of pre-dawn is felt not in light, but in the air itself. A subtle shift in pressure occurs, a deepening of the chill. The dew begins to form, tiny beads of moisture collecting on the tips of the grass and the cold surface of stones. It is the earth breathing out. The shadows seem to grow heavier, pooling in the corners of rooms and at the base of trees. This is the deepest hour, the time when sleep is heaviest. The dreams of the city have settled into a quiet hum. There is no anticipation yet, only the profound, suspended moment of existence where the past and the future meet in the dark. The river flows on, darker now than the sky, a band of liquid obsidian moving through the heart of the world, carrying the silence forward, endlessly, peacefully, toward the sea. Along the damp banks, where the river mud meets the roots of the papyrus, a low mist begins to rise. It separates from the surface of the dark water like a slow exhale, curling around the stems of the reeds in pale, ghostly ribbons. This mist is the breath of the river, cool and heavy with the scent of wet clay. It drifts inland, softening the hard edges of the landscape, blurring the line between the water and the shore. In this fog, the world feels smaller, more intimate. The distant cliffs are hidden now, veiled in white silence. Sound travels differently here, dampened and thick. The splash of a fish jumping is muted, a dull thud that is swallowed instantly by the vapor. The mist touches the sleeping earth with a gentle, moist hand, settling on the leaves of the acacia trees and the rough surfaces of the limestone rocks, turning the dry dust into a dark, heavy earth that smells of growth and ancient origins. Further inland, in the open-air enclosures of the farms, the cattle are sleeping. They stand or lie in groups, their large, warm bodies creating a small island of heat in the chill of the desert night. There is a deep, rhythmic comfort in the sound of their breathing, a collective sigh that rises and falls like a slow tide. Occasionally, a hoof shifts in the straw, or a tail swishes softly against a flank, but these are quiet movements, barely disturbing the peace. The oxen, with their wide, curved horns, rest their heavy heads on the ground, their dark eyes closed against the night. They are the living engines of the valley, the strength that pulls the plow and turns the earth. But now they are simply creatures of the quiet, resting in the care of the shadows. The smell here is earthy and rich, the scent of straw and warm animal fur mixing with the cool, clean air of the pre-dawn. It is a primitive, comforting scent, speaking of safety and the simple, enduring cycle of life that sustains the people. Beyond the animal pens, the great grain silos stand like silent sentinels against the starry sky. These are tall, conical structures built of mud brick, their smooth walls curving upward into the darkness. Inside, the wealth of the land is stored in darkness. Thousands of bushels of emmer wheat and barley lie in massive shifting piles, dry and golden. The air inside the silos is different from the outside. It is dry, dusty, and smells intensely of harvest. It is the scent of the sun trapped in the grain, released slowly into the cool night. There is a profound stillness here, a feeling of suspended energy. This grain is the life of the kingdom, waiting to be ground into flour, baked into bread, and offered to the gods. In the shadows near the base of the silos, a cat sits motionless, its silhouette cut sharply against the pale wall. It is the guardian of the grain, watching the darkness with eyes that catch the faint starlight. It does not move. It is part of the silence, a living statue dedicated to the protection of the harvest. Across the river, on the western bank, where the sun goes to die each evening, the city of the dead lies in absolute stillness. This is a different kind of quiet, heavier and more permanent than the sleep of the living. The tombs are cut deep into the rock of the cliffs, hidden away from the wind. Inside these chambers, beyond the sealed doors, the air has not moved for centuries. It is cool and dry, preserving the silence like a precious object. The walls are covered in paintings of vibrant blues, ochres, and greens, depicting scenes of a perfect life, harvests that never fail, rivers that are always full, feasts that never end. In the absolute darkness of the tomb, these images are invisible, yet they possess a vibrant presence. They are waiting in the eternal dark, watching over the resting souls. The gold leaf on the sarcophagi does not glint, for there is no light to catch it, but the richness remains, a hidden treasure wrapped in the velvet embrace of the earth. Back in the village, in the workshop of a potter, the wheel sits still in the center of the room. A mound of wet clay rests on the table, covered with a damp cloth to keep it from drying out in the night air. The clay is cool and heavy, a piece of the riverbank brought indoors. It holds the potential of the vessel it will become, a jar for water, a bowl for offering, a cup for wine. But for now, it is formless, resting in the quiet interval between the earth and the fire. The tools of the trade, smooth stones for polishing, wooden ribs for shaping, are laid out in a neat row, their surfaces worn smooth by years of touch. The room smells of wet earth and drying mud, a damp, grounding scent that feels as old as the river. The silence here is filled with the memory of motion, the echo of the wheel spinning, but in this deep hour, the stillness is absolute. In the bakery, the great ovens are cold, their fires extinguished hours ago. The ash in the hearth is gray and soft, retaining only the faintest memory of yesterday's heat. The clay walls of the oven are thick and darkened by smoke. Baskets of flour sit waiting in the corner, covered with linen. The air here carries the lingering sweetness of yeast and toasted grain, a ghost of the morning meal that has passed, and a promise of the one to come. There is a sense of pause in this room, a heavy, restful interlude before the labor of the dawn begins. The kneading troughs are scraped clean, the wooden peels leaning against the wall. The space feels expectant, like a held breath, waiting for the first spark of flint that will wake the fire and begin the day anew. High above, the stars have shifted imperceptibly in their courses. The constellation of Orion, the great hunter whom the Egyptians saw as Osiris, strides across the southern sky, his belt of 3 bright stars glittering in the cold air. He is the Lord of eternity, watching over the sleeping land. The light from these stars is cold and distant, piercing the veil of the atmosphere to touch the dark waters of the Nile. The reflection on the river is broken only by the occasional ripple of a fish surfacing to catch an insect, a tiny disturbance that sends concentric rings expanding silently towards the banks. The connection between the sky and the river is tangible here, a mirror image of light and dark, heaven and earth locked in a silent embrace. As the sleeper turns in their bed, adjusting the linen against the chill, they are held in this vast, interconnected web of silence. The heartbeat slows even further, syncing with the slow, deep rhythm of the valley. There is no separation between the sleeper and the land. The breath in the lungs is the same air that moves through the reeds. The blood in the veins shares the rhythm of the river. The darkness is a protective cloak, heavy and soft, shielding the mind from the brightness of the sun and the demands of the day. It is a time of restoration, where the soul can wander in the quiet fields of the dream world, guided by the gentle flow of the night. The silence is not empty, it is full of presence, full of the slow, steady pulse of a world that has learned how to rest. The shadows hold their ground, deep and impenetrable, keeping the secrets of the night safe until the golden boat of the sun begins its journey once more.
On the edge of the cultivated land, where the dark, fertile soil abruptly meets the pale drift of the desert sand, the silence takes on a different quality. Here, the boundary between life and the void is a sharp, visible line, currently hidden in the deep gray of the pre-dawn hours. A solitary figure stands watch on a low ridge, wrapped in heavy linen against the biting cold of the open desert. This is a guardian of the necropolis, one of the Medjay, whose duty is to watch over the sleep of the kings and the silence of the tombs. He does not move. He stands as still as the limestone cliffs behind him, his spear resting gently against his shoulder. His eyes are trained on the horizon, watching for the movement of jackals or the shadows of grave robbers. But tonight, there is nothing. The desert is empty, a vast ocean of stillness that stretches out to the ends of the earth.
The wind here whispers over the dunes with a dry, sibilant hiss, shifting the grains of sand one by one, rearranging the landscape in a slow, eternal process that no human hand can stop. Far beyond this lonely outpost, deep in the heart of the western desert, the great oases lie like scattered jewels in the dark. These are islands of life in a sea of stone, places where the underground water bubbles up from deep aquifers to feed groves of date palms and olive trees. In these remote settlements, the night is even deeper than in the valley. The distance from the great river makes the silence feel ancient and heavy. The water in the central pool of the oasis is perfectly still, reflecting the Milky Way with a clarity that is almost dizzying. The palm fronds overhead form a dense black canopy that blocks out the sky, creating a tunnel of shadows where travelers sleep. A caravan on its way to the distant copper mines rests here, the camels kneeling in the sand, their long necks curved back against their bodies. The air smells of brackish water and dry dust, a scent of survival in the midst of emptiness. There is no sound of the Nile here, only the occasional rustle of dry leaves and the immense, crushing weight of the desert silence. Back within the stone walls of the great temple complex, the sanctuary remains sealed in absolute darkness. The heavy cedar doors of the inner shrine are bolted shut, protecting the statue of the god that rests inside. Here, in the Holy of Holies, the air is thick with the scent of kifi, the sacred incense burned at sunset. The smoke has long since settled, coating the stone walls in a fragrant resin, but the smell lingers, sweet and heavy. It is a sensory memory of the prayers offered hours ago. The stone floor is cool to the touch, polished smooth by the bare feet of generations of priests. No light penetrates this deep into the temple. It is a womb of stone, designed to hold the divine presence in safety and quiet until the return of the sun. The silence here is not empty. It is charged with a potent, vibrating energy, a waiting presence that fills the dark space. The god sleeps, gaining strength for the renewal of the world that will come with the morning rituals. In the workshops surrounding the temple, the tools of the scribes and artisans lie dormant. A palette of pigments sits on a wooden table, the cakes of red ochre and yellow orpiment dry and waiting for water. Beside them, a reed brush rests where it was placed at the end of the day, the bristles stiff with dried paint. A scroll of papyrus lies half unrolled, held down by a smooth stone weight. The text on the scroll is a hymn to the rising sun, the black ink stark against the pale fibers. In the dimness, the hieroglyphs seem to float on the page, the birds and reeds and seated figures resting in their rows. The room holds the quiet of suspended intellect, a pause in the endless work of recording, measuring, and praising. The dust motes that danced in the shafts of afternoon sunlight have settled onto the floor, covering the footprints of the scribes in a fine gray layer of forgetfulness. Down by the river's edge, where the mud is thick and soft, the great crocodiles have hauled themselves out of the water to rest on the sandbanks. They lie in tangled heaps, massive and prehistoric, their armored backs gleaming dully in the starlight. They are the lords of the river, ancient and unchanging, sleeping with mouths slightly open to regulate their heat. They do not dream as humans dream. Their rest is a deep, cold torpor, a suspension of time. The birds that usually pick at their teeth are gone, roosting in the reeds nearby. The only movement is the slow, rhythmic expansion of a scaly flank as a breath is taken and released. The river flows past them, ignoring their presence, carrying its journey north. The water near the bank is murky and slow, swirling around the submerged roots of the willow trees, carrying the silt that will become the land of tomorrow. In the narrow streets of the workers' village, the houses are packed tight together, sharing walls and warmth. On the flat rooftops, families sleep side by side on woven mats, taking advantage of the cool night air. The wind from the north, the sweet breath of life, blows gently over the sleeping forms, fluttering the edges of the linen sheets. A child turns in sleep, flinging an arm out across the mat. A mother shifts to pull a cover higher. These are small, unconscious movements, the body seeking comfort in the depths of rest. The sounds of the village are the sounds of sleep, the soft murmur of breathing, the occasional bark of a dog in the distance, the rustle of straw. There is a profound sense of safety here, born of community. They are all drifting together on the same tide of night, protected by their neighbors, their walls, and the gods who watch from the stars above. Under the ground, beneath the floor of the valley, the water table moves in secret channels. The earth itself is saturated with the life of the river. The roots of the sycamore trees reach down deep into the dark soil, drinking silently in the night. The seeds planted in the fields are swelling in the damp earth, the first stirrings of germination beginning in the dark. It is a slow, invisible explosion of life, happening inches beneath the sleeping feet of the farmers. The energy of the land does not sleep, it merely changes its focus, turning inward to the work of growth and renewal. The soil is heavy and black, rich with the decay of 1,000 years, feeding the cycle that has sustained this valley since the beginning of time. As the night stretches towards its end, the darkness seems to deepen one final time. The stars are at their brightest, sharp points of white fire in the velvet black. The Milky Way is a river of light, mirroring the river of water below. The connection between the two flows is palpable, a vertical alignment of the cosmos. The air is at its coldest, crisp and clean. It enters the lungs with a refreshing bite, clearing the mind of the day's dust. The world feels suspended in a perfect balance, poised between the memory of yesterday and the promise of tomorrow. There is no urgency to move forward. The moment holds itself, complete and whole. The silence is a physical weight, a comforting blanket that wraps the world in peace. Everything that needs to be done has been done. Everything that will be is waiting in the wings. For now, there is only the breathing of the earth, the flow of the water, and the deep, dreamless sleep of history.
In the harbor of Memphis, where the river widens to embrace the city, the great trading ships lie heavy in the water. Their cedar hulls, darkened by water and pitch, creak softly against the stone quay. The thick ropes that bind them to the land hang slack in the stillness, heavy with the moisture of the night. These vessels have traveled from distant seas, carrying the scents of foreign lands, timber from Lebanon, incense from Punt, copper from Cyprus, but now they are silent. The masts stand like a forest of bare trees against the stars, stripping the sky of its vastness and grounding it in the works of human hands. There is a smell here of old wood, wet rope, and the mineral tang of the river mud. It is a scent of travel and rest, of long journeys paused in the safety of the harbor. The water laps against the wood,
in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, a lullaby for the sailors sleeping on the decks, wrapped in their cloaks, dreaming of the open sea. High above the harbor, on the plateau that overlooks the valley, the great stone monuments of the ancestors stand in absolute silence. They were ancient even to the people sleeping in the mud brick houses below. The pyramids rise from the desert floor like geometric mountains, their smooth limestone casing stones reflecting the starlight with a ghostly, pale luminescence. They are triangular shadows cut from the fabric of the night, perfect and unmoving. The wind flows around them, diverted by their massive bulk, whistling softly through the gaps in the stone. At their feet, the great Sphinx crouches in the sand, its eyes open, watching the eastern horizon with a patience that spans millennia. A lion's body is merged with the earth, a part of the bedrock itself, while the human face gazes eternally forward. In this darkness, the stone seems to breathe, holding the heat of the day deep within its core, radiating a faint warmth into the cooling air. It is a presence of immense weight and stability, a promise that some things endure forever, untouched by the fleeting nature of a single human night. Inside the high whitewashed walls of the royal palace, the silence is curated and profound. Here, the air is perfumed with the scent of lilies and alabaster jars of oil. The corridors are long and cool, lined with columns painted to resemble bundles of papyrus reeds. The guards at the doorways stand as motionless as statues, their bronze spears catching the flicker of the oil lamps that burn low in the niches. They are trained to breathe without sound, to be part of the architecture, watching over the living God who sleeps within. In the royal bedchamber, the linens are the finest in the land, sheer and soft as air. The pharaoh sleeps, the weight of the double crown set aside, a mortal man resting in the care of the gods. The room is a sanctuary of shadows and gold, where the silence is a luxury as precious as the lapis lazuli on the walls. The only sound is the faint rhythmic movement of a fan, moved by a servant in the corner to keep the air stirring, a gentle breeze that smells of the night garden outside. Deep in a small chamber near the roof of the temple, a different kind of time is being kept. A water clock, a simple vessel of stone marked with precise lines, drips slowly into a basin below. Drop by drop, the water falls. It is the only measurement that matters in the dark. There is no sun to cast a shadow on a dial, only this steady, liquid counting of the hours. A priest sits nearby, his head bowed, listening to the cadence of the water. He does not need to see the level to know the hour. He feels it in the rhythm of the drops. It is a sound like a slow pulse, marking the progression of the night through its 12 gates. The water flows like life itself, inevitable and constant, moving from the vessel of the future into the basin of the past. The room is cool and damp, a quiet observatory of time, where the seconds are fluid and the minutes are measured in moisture. Out in the deep desert, far from the monuments and the city, the nocturnal world comes alive in silence. A fennec fox emerges from its burrow, its large ears swiveling to catch the faintest whisper of the wind. It moves across the sand with paws that leave no sound, a phantom of the dunes. The sand here is cool, shifting slightly underfoot, with a dry, whispering sigh. The moonlight turns the dunes into a seascape of silver and shadow, undulating waves of sand frozen in time. A desert owl glides overhead, its wings spread wide, casting a fleeting shadow that races across the ground. It does not cry out. The hunt is a silent dance. The desert is not empty. It is filled with a watchful presence, a life that thrives in the absence of the sun. The air is incredibly pure here, dry and thin, allowing the stars to shine with a piercing clarity that makes them feel close enough to touch. In the courtyards of the weavers, the indigo vats sit covered and still. The dye, deep and dark as the night sky, rests in its clay pots. The smell is sharp and organic, a scent of earth and transformation. During the day, this place is a hive of activity, of hands stained blue and wet cloth dripping in the sun. But now the color is sleeping. The wooden drying racks stand empty, their skeletal frames casting long, thin shadows across the packed earth floor. A stray cat walks along the top of the wall, its movement fluid and liquid, passing like a shadow within a shadow. It pauses to groom a paw, completely at ease in its domain. The domestic animals of the city are the true owners of the night, moving through the silent streets with a confidence that belongs to the dark. They know the shortcuts over the roofs and the cool spots under the granaries. They are the silent companions of the sleeper, watching the world while the people rest. Down by the reeds, the ibis birds are roosting, their long beaks tucked into their feathers. They look like white stones scattered among the dark green stalks. They are the birds of Thoth, the god of wisdom, and in their sleep they seem to hold a secret knowledge. The water around the reeds is still, trapped in the small bays and inlets of the riverbank. It reflects the dark stalks perfectly, creating a double world of reality and reflection. A lotus flower, closed tight for the night, bobs gently on the surface, a small dark fist, waiting for the morning light to open its hand. The mud of the bank is rich and black, cooling slowly, releasing the humidity it absorbed during the day. It is the smell of creation, the primal matter from which life is molded. The boundary between the waking world and the dreaming world is thin in this hour. The ancient Egyptians believed that the soul, the Ba, could leave the body during sleep, taking the form of a bird with a human head to travel the world or visit the gods. In the quiet of the room, one can almost imagine the soft flutter of wings, the soul taking flight in the safety of the night. It is a freedom from the heavy limbs, a weightless journey through the cool air. The sleeper breathes in the magic of the night, inhaling the protection of the amulets and the peace of the temple prayers. There is no fear here, only a sense of expansion, of the spirit stretching out to the corners of the room, the garden, the river. The body is an anchor, heavy and warm, holding the spirit to the earth while the mind drifts on the currents of the dark. As the earth continues its slow rotation, the very first, almost imperceptible shift toward morning begins deep in the atmosphere. It is not light yet, but a change in the quality of the darkness. The black of the sky softens by the smallest fraction of a degree. The air grows stiller, if that is possible, as if the world is holding its breath in anticipation. The dew is heavy now, coating the world in a fine, wet layer that will sparkle when the light returns. But for now, it is just cool moisture, a baptism of the night. The silence is at its deepest point, a profound, resonant quiet that seems to ring in the ears. It is a blanket of peace, woven from the threads of millions of sleeping breaths, covering the valley from the cataracts of the south.
In the quiet depths of the riverbank, beneath the surface of the dark water, the roots of the blue lotus are anchored in the mud. They are waiting for the first touch of the sun to rise and open, but for now they remain submerged and closed. The flower is tight and conical, a secret kept by the water. There is a deep biological patience here. The lotus knows the rhythm of the light instinctively, pulsing with a slow internal clock that matches the rotation of the earth. The water around the stems is cool and rich with silt, holding the plant in a gentle, buoyant embrace. In this darkness, the distinction between the water and the plant seems to vanish. They are both part of the same fluid world, suspended in the wet silence of the riverbed. The current strokes the leaves softly, a continuous, gentle touch that has not ceased since the river first carved its path through the stone. In the archives of the House of Life, adjacent to the temple, the silence is dry and smells of old wisdom. Thousands of papyrus scrolls are stacked in honeycomb niches along the walls, their rolled ends creating a pattern of circles in the gloom. These scrolls hold the medical treatises, the astronomical charts, and the hymns to the gods. They are the sleeping mind of the civilization. In the absence of light, the ink seems to rest on the fiber, the black and red pigments settling into the weave of the plant. There is no sound of reading here, no rustle of unrolling. The knowledge is dormant, stored safely within the cool, thick walls of mud brick. The dust that settles on the limestone floor is undisturbed, a fine gray powder that muffles the very idea of sound. It is a sanctuary of thought, where the words of ancestors wait patiently in the dark for the eyes of the living to return. High on the plateau, the wind shifts slightly, coming now from the vast open west. It carries no moisture, only the dry, clean scent of the deep desert. It moves through the columns of the unfinished monuments, singing a low, mournful note as it passes through the stone gaps. The shadows cast by the pillars are long and absolute, distinct bars of black against the pale sand. Inside the quarry, a colossal statue lies on its back, half separated from the bedrock. It is a king who has not yet been born into the light. His stone eyes look up at the stars with a blank, serene gaze. The rough marks of the chisels are still visible on his flank, frozen in the moment the workers laid down their tools. In the night, the stone feels incredibly heavy, grounded to the core of the earth, an anchor that holds the world in place while the sky spins above. In the workshop of a goldsmith, the fire has long been dead, but the metals remain. A pectoral of gold and lapis lazuli sits on the workbench, covered by a linen cloth. Under the fabric, the gold does not dim. It holds its luster even in the dark, a metal that the Egyptians believed was the flesh of the gods because it never tarnishes, never ages. The blue stone, flecked with pyrite like the night sky itself, sits cold and hard against the soft metal. The tools of the trade, the small bronze tongs, the polishing stones, the blowpipe, are arranged in order, resting. The room is small and smells of charcoal and wax. It is a space of transformation where raw earth becomes beauty, but tonight it is simply a room of quiet shapes and cooling surfaces, waiting for the breath of the craftsman to bring the heat back to the hearth. Within the humble homes of the village, the connection to the past is kept in the shadows of the main room. A small niche in the wall holds the bust of an ancestor, a simple limestone carving worn smooth by touch. A small bowl of offering remains from the evening meal, a piece of bread and a dried fig. In the silence,
the ancestor seems to watch over the sleeping family. There is no fear in this presence, only a sense of continuity. The line between the living and the dead is soft here, permeable in the quiet of the night. The sleeper on the mat is just one link in a chain that stretches back to the beginning of time. The house breathes around them, the mud bricks absorbing the chill, the thatched roof filtering the starlight. It is a cocoon of safety woven from the earth and the memory of those who came before. Out in the fields, the date palms stand in tall, silent rows. Their fronds are motionless now, the wind having died down to a mere whisper. They are the pillars of the landscape, their trunks rough and scaled. High up in the canopy, the clusters of dates hang heavy and sweet, ripening in the cool air. The tree is a creature of the sun, but it drinks the night. The roots go deep, finding the water that flows unseen beneath the sand. In the darkness, the trees seem to lean together, a silent council of elders watching over the sleeping crops. A bat flits between the trunks, a jagged shadow against the stars, hunting the insects that hover over the irrigation ditches. The sound of its wings is a soft flutter, felt more than heard, a ripple in the fabric of the night. The riverbank is a place of textures in the dark. The smooth, wet slide of the mud gives way to the rough, dry rustle of the halfa grass. The water moves against the clay with a sound like a whisper, repeating the same word over and over. Live, live, live. It is the heartbeat of the valley, a circulation system that never rests. Small creatures move in the interface between land and water. A crab scuttles sideways over a stone, its shell clicking faintly. A turtle rests on a log, its shell drying in the air. The river carries the silt of mountains far to the south, a gift of earth, traveling thousands of miles in the dark to build the delta. It is a journey of immense distance and patience, a flow that ignores the boundaries of kingdoms and the passage of dynasties. As the turning of the earth brings the valley closer to the dawn, the quality of the light in the sky begins to change imperceptibly. The zodiacal light, a faint triangular glow, appears on the eastern horizon. It is not the sun, but the reflection of sunlight on the dust of the solar system, a false dawn that precedes the true light. It is a ghostly, pearlescent glow, washing the lowest stars out of the sky. The darkness overhead turns from black to a deep, bruised indigo. The air grows heavier, the dew point reached, covering every surface in a fine, cold sweat. The silence deepens one last time, a profound hush that falls over the world before the waking. The birds in the reeds shift their weight, but do not call. The dogs in the village are silent. The world is held in suspension, a held breath between the night and the day. The sleeper feels this shift in their bones. The body cools, sinking deeper into the mattress. The mind, untethered from the day, floats in the velvet space of deep rest. There is an immense age in this moment. The same stars that looked down on the building of the pyramids look down now. The same wind that filled the sails of the royal barges blows through the window. Time is not a line here, but a circle, endlessly repeating. The night is a sanctuary, a vast, quiet temple where the soul is renewed. You are safe in this ancient darkness, held by the gravity of the earth and the rhythm of the river, drifting slowly, peacefully toward the promise of the morning that is still hours away.
In the secluded walled gardens of the nobility,
The vines of the grape arbors hang heavy and motionless. The trellis work, built of cedar poles lashed together with palm fiber, creates a tunnel of absolute shadow. Underneath this canopy, the air is trapped and cool, smelling faintly of damp earth and the sweet fermenting scent of fallen fruit. The grapes themselves are dark, swollen orbs, their skins dusted with a pale bloom that catches the faint starlight filtering through the leaves. They are reservoirs of the summer sun, holding the memory of the heat within their juice, but now they are cool to the touch. The ground beneath the vines is raked smooth, a patterned carpet of soil that shows no footprints. A small irrigation channel runs along the base of the vines, but the sluice is closed for the night, leaving only a damp, dark furrow where the water will flow when the day returns. It is a place of cultivation at rest, a pause in the cycle of growth where the plants seem to drink in the silence as deeply as they drink the water. Beyond the walled gardens, the streets of the city are canyons of gray shadow. The mud brick houses lean in toward each other, their whitewashed walls glowing dimly in the pre-dawn gloom. These bricks are made of the land itself, mixtures of mud and straw baked hard by the sun. They hold the cold of the night in their core now, radiating a protective chill that keeps the sleeping families inside deep in their rest. The narrow alleys are empty of life. The dust of the street is settled and still. There is a geometry to this silence, defined by the sharp angles of the roofs and the dark rectangles of the doorways. It is a labyrinth of quiet, a maze constructed to hold peace within its center. A stray breeze moves through the alley, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke from a dying fire miles away, a ghostly reminder of the evening meal that drifts through the sleeping city like a memory. On the outskirts of the settlement, where the cultivation gives way to the wild scrub, the nocturnal life of the valley continues its secret rituals. A desert hedgehog, small and armored, moves through the dry grass with a soft rustling sound. It is hunting for beetles in the dark, its nose twitching close to the ground. It stops, freezing into a spiny ball at the sound of a distant owl, then uncurls and continues its slow patrol. The life here is small and cautious, adapted to the shadows. The plants in this borderland are tough and woody, acacia and tamarisk trees that stand like twisted sculptures against the sky. Their thorns are sharp and hard, but their leaves are feathery and soft, filtering the wind with a sound like a sigh. The roots of these trees go deep, anchoring the soil against the wind, holding the edge of the living world against the encroachment of the sand. Deep within the sacred precinct of the temple, the sacred lake lies like a square of black glass. It is a man-made pool, dug deep into the earth to reach the groundwater, lined with dressed stone. It represents the primeval waters of creation, the Nun, from which the first mound of land rose at the beginning of time. In the darkness, the water is perfectly flat, unmarred by any ripple. Stone steps descend into the depths, disappearing into the black. This is where the priests will bathe before the morning rituals, purifying their bodies in the cold, clean water. But for now, the steps are dry and empty. The water waits in silence, a mirror for the passing stars. The stone walls surrounding the lake block out the wind, creating a pocket of stillness that feels heavy and ancient. The reflection of the temple pylons in the water is dark and massive, a sunken city of shadows that exists only in the night. Further south, near the cataracts where the Nile tumbles over granite rocks, the water is not silent. Here, the Nile speaks with a low, rushing roar that never ceases.
The white water churns in the starlight, foam ghostly against the black rocks. But even this sound is a form of silence, a constant white noise that drowns out all other disturbances. The granite boulders are smooth and rounded, polished by eons of flowing water. They are warm during the day, but cold now, slick with spray. The river here is powerful and wild, not yet the tame, wide highway of the lower valley. It is a reminder of the source, of the distant mountains and the heavy rains far to the south. The mist rising from the rapids hangs in the air, a damp cloud that nurtures the ferns and mosses clinging to the rock face. This is the pulse of the artery, the driving force that pushes the lifeblood of the kingdom north toward the sea. In the quiet of the linen fields, the flax plants stand tall and slender. They have been sown thick to encourage them to grow straight and long, producing the finest fibers. A gentle breeze moves across the field, and the plants sway together in a single fluid motion, like a green sea rippling in the dark. The tiny blue flowers are closed, folded in on themselves until the sun returns. There is a smell of green sap and dew here. This field is the future clothing of the kingdom, the tunics of the farmers, the robes of the priests, the wrappings for the dead. It is all sleeping here in the stalk, waiting for the harvest. The field stretches out to the horizon, a pale gray expanse under the stars, broken only by the dark line of an irrigation ditch. The silence here is soft and organic, the quiet of living things resting before their transformation. High on the desert plateau, the limestone ground is littered with flint nodules that gleam in the starlight. This is an ancient seabed raised up by the earth millions of years ago. The fossils of seashells are trapped in the rock, spiral shapes of creatures that lived when this desert was an ocean. Time here is measured in geological epochs, not human lifespans. The wind scours the rock, polishing the flint until it shines. A rock hyrax sleeps in a crevice, huddled together with its kin for warmth. The stone around them is protective and solid. The darkness in these crevices is absolute, a shelter from the vast open sky. The silence of the plateau is the silence of stone, heavy, enduring, and indifferent to the passing of the night. It is a foundation that underpins everything in the valley below, a solid base for the fragile layer of life that clings to the river. In the archives of the palace, the clay tablets of diplomatic correspondence lie on wooden shelves. These are letters from kings of distant lands, Babylon, Hattusa, Mitanni. They are written in cuneiform, wedge-shaped marks pressed into the clay. The tablets are dry and hard, preserving the voices of emperors and princes who are long dead. In the quiet of the room, the arguments in alliances, the requests for gold, and the offers of marriage are all silent. The history of the world is stacked in neat rows, waiting to be read. The room smells of dry earth and dust. A scribe's palette has been left on a table, the red ink dried in its well. The stillness here is the stillness of suspended conversation, of words that have traveled thousands of miles to rest in this cool, dark room. The weight of the clay holds the memory of the hands that shaped it, the stylus that marked it, and the eyes that read it. As the pre-dawn hours lengthen, the dew begins to settle more heavily on the world. It coats the wooden deck of the boats, making the planks slick and dark. It gathers on the petals of the sleeping flowers and the leaves of the palm trees. It is a quiet baptism, a washing of the world while it sleeps. The moisture muffles sound even further, dampening the earth and softening the dry dust. The air feels thick and rich, easier to breathe. The sleeper in their bed inhales this cool, damp air, feeling it soothe the throat and lungs. It is the breath of the river, spreading out to claim the land before the sun returns to burn it away. The night is a time of water, of the moon, of the cool blue shadows that heal and restore. The heat of yesterday is a forgotten dream. The heat of tomorrow is not yet a threat. There is only this cool, wet, silent now. The sense of drifting continues, a gentle movement downstream, without effort. The boat of the soul floats on a river of silence, carried past the sleeping temples and the quiet fields. There are no obstacles in the water, no storms in the sky.
In the sheltered corners of the orchards, where the trees block the wind, the clay hives of the beekeepers stand in stacked rows. These are simple cylinders of mud and straw, lying on their sides like fallen logs. Inside, the colony is dormant. The hum of the hive has dropped to a low, barely audible vibration, a collective warmth generated by thousands of wings held close. The air here is thick with the scent of wax and warm honey, a heavy golden smell that clings to the earth. It is a fragrance of summer trapped in the cool of the winter night. The bees are the messengers of the sun god Ra, born from his tears, but now they are resting in the dark. There is no movement at the entrance of the hives. The guard bees are still, waiting for the first warmth to signal the beginning of the foraging flight. The silence of the apiary is a living silence, a pause in the endless work of gathering sweetness from the flowers of the valley. Deep within the royal stables, the air is warm and smells of sweet hay and polished leather. The king's horses, prized animals brought from the lands of the east, sleep standing up. Their breathing is slow and deep, large lungs expanding and contracting with a rhythmic grace. Their coats are groomed to a high shine, gleaming dully in the shadows. Occasionally, a hoof shifts in the straw, or a long tail swishes against a flank, but the restlessness of the day is gone. The chariots are parked in disciplined rows nearby. Their wheels, with spoked rims of bent wood and raw hide, rest on the dirt floor. These are machines of speed and power, designed to fly across the desert sands, but now they are static sculptures. The gold leaf on the chassis is dark, reflecting nothing. The stillness here is the rest of the athlete, the quiet recovery of muscles that are built for motion. In the cool storage rooms of the breweries, the great ceramic vats are filled with the mash of barley and water. Here, a slow, microscopic alchemy is taking place in the dark. The fermentation bubbles up through the thick liquid, a soft, organic ticking sound that whispers through the room. It is the sound of grain transforming into spirit. The yeast is working in the silence, driven by the same invisible forces that swell the seeds in the ground. The air is heavy with the sour, yeasty smell of brewing beer. It is a scent of sustenance, of the liquid bread that feeds the worker and the noble alike. The large jars are sealed with clay stoppers, marked with the seal of the brewer. They sit in the shadows like heavy, round bellies, full and satisfied. The process cannot be rushed. It requires the patience of the night to reach completion. On the workbench of a faience maker, the raw materials of his craft lie in stone bowls. There is silica sand, ground fine as flour, and ash from the burning of desert plants. There is copper ore, crushed to a green powder, waiting to provide the brilliant blue glaze that mimics the turquoise stone. In the dim light, these powders are gray and colorless. They are sleeping potential. They wait for the fire of the kiln to fuse them into the shiny, glass-like beads and amulets that protect the living and the dead.
The molds for the tiny Shabti figures are stacked nearby, made of fired clay. They are empty now, negative spaces waiting to be filled. The workshop is cold, the furnaces dark. The silence here is dry and dusty, a pause in the act of creation, where the ingredients of the earth wait to be reborn as objects of beauty. At the edge of the temple precinct, the Nilometer plunges deep into the earth. It is a square shaft lined with stone stairs that descend down into the groundwater. The air gets cooler and damper with every step down. At the bottom, the water of the river connects silently with the sacred measurement markings cut into the wall. In this deep, echoey chamber, the water is black and absolutely still. It is a direct vein to the river, bypassing the banks and the mud. A priest's torch has left a soot mark on the ceiling, a memory of the last reading, but now the shaft is empty of light. The water level hovers near a line carved centuries ago. It is a secret conversation between the earth and the river, hidden away in the dark, measuring the pulse of the coming flood while the world above sleeps. Inside the sleeping chamber of a modest home, the darkness is protective and close. A small amulet of the dwarf god Bes hangs from a wooden peg on the wall. He is the protector of households, mothers, and children, his grotesque face designed to scare away bad dreams. In the gloom, the amulet is just a small, dark shape, but its presence is felt. The sleeper breathes rhythmically, safe under the watch of the household gods. A headrest made of wood supports the neck, keeping the head cool and aligned. It is a hard pillow, but one that has cradled the sleeper for years, worn smooth by skin and hair. The room is simple, stripped of clutter. There is a chest for linen, a mat on the floor, a small altar. The simplicity creates a space of mental quiet where the mind can unspool without distraction. The silence of the house is the silence of contentment, of needs met and safety assured. Beyond the last house, where the desert floor is a landscape of absolute purity, the wind has smoothed away the footprints of the day. The sand is rippled like water, a frozen sea of dunes that stretches to the horizon. In the troughs between the dunes, the shadows are pools of ink. The silence here is so complete it feels like a pressure in the ears. There is no vegetation to rustle, no water to lap, no insects to call. It is a vacuum of sound. The rocks that litter the desert floor are shattered by eons of heat and cold, lying in sharp, angular fragments. They are dark against the pale sand, like debris from the creation of the world. This is the land of the red, the chaotic desert that balances the black land of the fertile valley. But tonight, the chaos is at rest. The desert is a sleeping giant, passive and cool under the gaze of the stars. High on the flat roof of the observatory, the star watchers have not moved. They use a tool made of a palm rib with a slit cut in the top, the merket, to track the movement of the stars across the sky. They are waiting for the rising of specific stars, the decans, that mark the hours of the night. Their patience is infinite. They do not speak, they only watch. The sky is a vast calendar, a clockwork mechanism of divine order. They see the patterns that govern the flooding of the Nile and the sowing of the fields. To watch the sky is to read the mind of the gods. The air up here is clear and cold, far above the dust of the ground. The silence is the silence of the cosmos, the grand, wheeling silence of the spheres turning in their orbits. As the night nears its end, the darkness seems to hold its breath. The deep indigo of the sky remains unbroken, but there is a sense of thinning, a lessening of the weight of the night. The birds in the marshes are awake but silent,
preening their feathers in the dark. The fish in the river are moving into the shallows. The world is preparing itself. The sleeper feels this preparation as a lightening of the spirit. The dreams become lighter, closer to the surface. The body is rested, the limbs heavy with relaxation but ready to move. The silence is no longer the silence of deep sleep, but the silence of anticipation. It is a holy moment, the pause before the curtain rises. The river flows on, darker than the night, carrying the life of the valley toward the sea, endless, timeless, and serene.
Far to the north, where the single ribbon of the river fractures into 1,000 veins, the delta spreads out under the stars like a dark open hand. The land here is flat and limitless, a vast tapestry of marsh and meadow that merges imperceptibly with the sea. The air changes quality in this place. It loses the dry, dusty heat of the desert and takes on the sharp, clean tang of salt. The wind moving through the reeds carries the moisture of the Mediterranean, a scent of deep water and distant storms. In the darkness, the channels of the river are difficult to distinguish from the solid land. Everything is a shade of deep gray or black, a landscape of water and reflection. The birds that roost here are countless, their sleeping forms huddled in the dense thickets of papyrus. There is a feeling of openness here, of boundaries dissolving. The river does not end abruptly. It simply relaxes, widening its embrace until it becomes the sea, surrendering its current to the slow, rhythmic pulse of the tides. In the courtyards of the House of Instruction, where the young scribes learn their trade, the ground is littered with white limestone flakes. These ostraca, the scratch pads of the ancient world, lie scattered in the dust like fallen petals. In the dim light, they are pale, jagged shapes against the dark earth. Each one bears the marks of a student's hand, a practice line of hieroglyphs, a calculation of grain, a clumsy drawing of a bird. But now the voices of the teachers are silent. The recitations have ceased. The limestone chips are cold, holding the memory of the day's lessons in their scratched surfaces. The inkwells are dry, the reed brushes washed and bundled. The silence here is the silence of potential, of minds resting before the next layer of knowledge is applied. The space feels empty but expectant, a classroom of shadows where the only lesson is the patient endurance of the night. Outside the massive pylons of the temple, the colossal statues of the kings sit on their thrones of stone. They are mountains carved into the shape of men. In the darkness, their features are smoothed away, leaving only the overwhelming impression of size and power. They sit with hands resting on their knees, staring out past the mud brick walls of the city, past the fields, into the void of the horizon. The wind swirls around their massive legs, a tiny whistling draft against the immovable rock. The stone is cold to the touch, having surrendered the sun's heat hours ago. It feels ancient and permanent, a material that has forgotten how to change. These sentinels do not sleep. They are the eternal guardians, their presence casting long rectangular shadows that stretch across the avenue of sphinxes, creating a path of darkness that leads to the holy gate. In the workshop of a perfumer, the air is heavy and complex, layered with the ghosts of 100 scents. The room is filled with jars of alabaster and travertine, their heavy lids sealed with wax. Inside, the precious oils and fats have congealed in the cool of the night. There is the deep, resinous smell of myrrh,
the sweet, cloying scent of Madonna lily and the sharp, spicy note of cinnamon brought from lands far to the south. These scents do not drift, they hang in the still air, a dense, invisible fog of fragrance. The wooden press used to squeeze the oil from the flowers stands idle in the corner, its screw thread coated in a thin sheen of grease. The floor is slippery and smooth. It is a room of luxury and ritual, where the essence of plants is captured and preserved, waiting to anoint the statues of the gods or the skin of the living when the light returns. On the flat expanse of the drying fields, thousands of mud bricks lie in neat, geometric rows. They were formed yesterday from the river silt and straw, pressed into wooden molds and left to bake in the sun. Now they are cool and damp, reclaiming moisture from the night air. The field looks like a vast, low city of the dead, a grid of dark rectangles stretching away into the gloom. The smell here is of raw earth, a wet, fertile scent that speaks of the river's gift. These bricks are the flesh of the city, the material of every home and wall. They are resting in the interval between their creation and their use. There is a sense of humble purpose in this field. The mud has been given form, and now it waits to be given a place in the rising walls of the kingdom. Down at the ferry crossing, the boat is moored to a wooden post driven deep into the bank. The rope dips into the water, heavy and wet. The ferry is a flat, wide raft designed to carry cattle and carts across the flow. It floats sluggishly, rocking slightly with the movement of the current. The ferryman is asleep in a small shelter nearby, wrapped in his cloak. The crossing is closed. The river has become a barrier again, a wide, dark road that cannot be traveled until the sun wakes the ferryman. The separation between the east bank of the living and the west bank of the dead is absolute in the night. The water flows between them, a silent border patrol that respects no authority but gravity. In the deep vaults of the treasury, behind doors sealed with clay and stamped with the cartouche of the vizier, the darkness is total. Here lie the taxes of the kingdom, not just gold, but the true wealth of the land. Baskets of dried grain, jars of thick oil, bundles of fine linen, and rings of copper and silver. The air is airless and dry, designed to prevent rot and decay. The silence is heavy, pressing against the eardrums. The objects are invisible, stripped of their glitter and color by the absence of light. They exist only as weight and volume, a stockpile of energy stored against the lean years. The dust on the floor is undisturbed. The air is still. It is a tomb for material things, a place where the labor of the harvest is frozen in time, waiting to be measured out and distributed by the scribes of the palace. High above the sleeping streets, a rooftop garden catches the first hint of the changing wind. A trellis of jasmine climbs the wall, its star-shaped flowers glowing faintly white in the gloom. The scent is overpowering in the cool air, sweet and heady. A small pool of water in a stone basin reflects the setting stars. A wooden headrest has been left on a woven mat, forgotten by someone who sought the cool air earlier in the night. The space feels intimate and human, a private sanctuary suspended above the dust of the street. The sky feels closer here, a vast dark dome that rests on the edges of the horizon. The silence of the garden is broken only by the rustle of the leaves, a soft, whispering conversation between the plant and the wind. Along the pathways that border the canals, the tamarisk trees stand with their feathery branches drooping low. They drink from the seepage of the water, their roots forming a net that holds the bank together. In the branches of one tree, a dove is sleeping, its head tucked into its breast feathers. It is a small ball of warmth in the cool night. The tree offers shelter, breaking the wind and hiding the bird from the eyes of predators. The ground beneath the tree is covered in a carpet of fallen needles, soft and silent underfoot. The shadows here are lace-like and shifting, moving gently as the branches sway. It is a small pocket of wilderness on the edge of the ordered fields, a place where the wild things of the valley find their rest. As the moment of dawn draws closer, though the sky remains dark, the energy of the land begins to gather. It is a subtle tightening, a microscopic tensing of the muscles of the world. The dew is at its heaviest, dripping from the eaves of the houses and the leaves of the crops. The earth is fully cooled, having released the last of yesterday's sun. The silence is no longer just an absence of sound. It is a presence, a deep resonant hum of potential. The river seems to flow with more purpose, its surface smoothing out into a sheet of dark glass. The sleeper in the bed takes a deep, slow breath, inhaling the peace of the final hour. The heart beats slow and steady, a drum keeping time with the universe. There is no need to wake yet. The night is still the ruler of the world. The darkness is a soft, heavy blanket.
In the darkened courtyard of a baker's home, the clay oven sits like a sleeping giant, its rounded dome cold to the touch. The fire that roared within it yesterday has long since crumbled into a bed of soft gray ash. There is a faint, lingering warmth deep in the floor of the oven, a memory of the heat that baked the bread for the evening meal. The air here smells of wood smoke and toasted grain, a comforting domestic scent that hangs low in the heavy air. Next to the oven, the grinding stones are silent, their rough surfaces resting against each other. A large ceramic bowl used for mixing dough sits empty and clean, waiting for the hands of the baker. The space is still, defined by the simple functional shapes of the tools of sustenance. It is a pause in the endless cycle of feeding the family, a quiet interlude where the work is done and the promise of the next meal is just a whisper in the dark. Along the smaller irrigation canals that grid the fields, the water is perfectly flat, a mirror of black glass. The frogs that sang in the earlier hours have fallen silent, retreating into the cool mud of the banks. The water here does not rush like the main river. It stands still, soaking slowly into the thirsty earth. The reeds that line the ditch are motionless, their tall, thin shadows stretching across the water's surface. A small wooden sluice gate, lowered to hold the water back, is damp with dew. The wood is dark and swollen with moisture. In this stillness, the water acts as a seal over the land, keeping the moisture deep in the soil, where the roots of the onions and leeks are drinking. The reflection of a single bright star hangs suspended in the center of the canal, a point of light trapped in the dark earth. At the entrance to the great hypostyle hall of the temple, the massive stone columns rise up like a forest of petrified trees. In the darkness, their lotus-shaped capitals are lost in the gloom above. The stone is cool, radiating a chill that seeps into the air. These columns are carved with scenes of offerings and rituals, but in the night, the images are invisible. Only the texture of the stone remains, the smooth polish of the granite and the sharp lines of the hieroglyphs. The silence here is vast and architectural, held in place
by the sheer weight of the rock. The hall is a cavern of shadows, a space built to hold the awe of the divine. There is no sound of footsteps, no chanting of priests, only the heavy, settling silence of stone that has stood in this spot for centuries. The air is still and dry, smelling faintly of ancient dust and the incense that has permeated the walls over generations. Where the cultivated black land meets the rising slope of the desert, the transition is marked by a sudden silence of the soil. The rich, damp smell of the fields vanishes, replaced by the clean, mineral scent of dry sand. A jackal, returning from its nightly patrol, trots silently along this border. Its paws make no sound on the soft sand. It stops to sniff the air, its ears swiveling to catch the drift of the wind, then vanishes like smoke into the shadows of the dunes. The desert beyond is a landscape of curves and edges, sculpted by the wind into frozen waves. The sand is cool now, drained of the sun's fury. It lies in deep drifting banks that hide the bedrock below. The silence of the desert is absolute, a void that swallows sound and holds the secrets of the night in its vast, empty embrace. In the sleeping chamber, the air is thick with peace. The linen sheet, pulled up against the chill, feels cool and smooth against the skin. The body is heavy, sunk deep into the mattress, anchored by the gravity of rest. The rhythm of breathing is slow and steady, a soft rise and fall that matches the cadence of the sleeping world outside. There is no need to move, no need to think. The mind is a quiet pool, reflecting only the stillness of the room. The shadows in the corners are soft and protective, wrapping the space in a cocoon of darkness. The house settles with a faint creak of timber, a sound of relaxation. The sleeper is safe here, held in the hand of the night, drifting on the calm waters of deep, restorative sleep. High above, the constellations continue their slow, majestic wheeling across the sky. They are the clock of the night, marking the passage of the hours with cold, diamond precision. The Great Bear, known to the ancients as the foreleg of the ox, swings low in the northern sky, tethered to the pole star. The light from these stars falls on the sleeping pyramids, the silent temples, and the quiet fields with the same impartial grace. It is a light from the beginning of time, watching over the transient sleep of the valley. The distance is immense, a silence of light years that touches the earth with a gentle, ghostly finger. The sky is a vast, dark ocean, and the earth is a ship floating quietly on its surface, drifting slowly through the long, peaceful hours before the dawn.
Down by the river's edge, where the water moves slowly against the bank, the fishing nets hang from wooden poles to dry in the night air. They are heavy, woven from coarse flax, and they drape like dark, silent curtains against the stars. The smell of the river weeds and wet rope is strong here, a scent of deep water and old fibers. In the darkness, the mesh of the nets creates intricate patterns of shadow on the sand. Every knot is tight and secure, tied by hands that know the strength of the current. The water laps gently at the hulls of the small skiffs moored nearby, a rhythmic, hollow sound that echoes softly in the mist. There is no movement on the decks. The oars are shipped, resting in their locks. The river is the only thing awake, moving past the sleeping boats with a quiet, relentless power, carrying the silt of the south toward the sea in the dark. Inside the high walls of a noble's villa, the inner garden is a sanctuary of cool air. A rectangular pool lies in the center, lined with blue tiles that are now black in the gloom. The water is perfectly flat, unmarred by wind. Beneath the surface, the ornamental fish drift in the shadows, suspended in the cool depths. The lotus flowers have closed their petals tight, hiding their gold hearts until the return of the sun. The trees around the pool, sycamores and date palms, stand motionless, their leaves heavy with the night's dew. A small wooden bench sits in the shadow of a tree, empty and still. The silence here is cultivated and profound, a quiet luxury protected from the dust and noise of the streets outside. The air smells of damp earth and the faint, sweet perfume of jasmine that blooms in the dark. Out in the open fields, the wooden plows lie resting on their sides at the edge of the furrows. The wood is smooth and polished from years of use, worn down by the grip of the farmer and the friction of the earth. In the starlight, the grain of the wood is just visible, a map of years and seasons. The metal tips of the hoes are cool, covered in a fine layer of dew. The earth around them is broken and dark, turned to receive the seed. There is a sense of heavy, patient waiting in these tools. They are extensions of the human arm, now at rest. The soil breathes slowly, releasing the last of the day's warmth into the cool air. The silence of the field is thick and organic, the quiet of a living thing that is gathering strength for the growth to come. Deep in the western desert, far from the life of the valley, the dry wadis cut through the limestone plateau. These are ancient riverbeds, carved by rains that fell thousands of years ago, now dry and silent. The stones here are rounded and smooth, tumbling over one another in frozen cascades. The wind whistles softly through the canyons, a low, mournful sound that has no audience. The shadows in the deep crevices are absolute, pools of ink where the light never reaches. The air is incredibly dry, stripping the moisture from the stone. It is a landscape of geology and time, where the slow erosion of the wind is the only clock. The silence is vast and indifferent, a heavy stone silence that has endured for eons. In the small room of a scribe, the tools of writing sit orderly on a low wooden table. The palette, with its cakes of black and red ink, is dry. The water pot is empty, a small ceramic bowl waiting to be filled. The reed brushes are gathered in a bundle, their tips stained with the words of yesterday. A scroll of papyrus lies rolled and tied with a linen string, sealing its contents in darkness. The room smells of dry plant fibers and mineral pigments. The walls are white and bare, reflecting the dim starlight that filters through the high window. There is a feeling of suspended thought here. The words are sleeping in the ink, waiting for the water to wake them. The silence is the silence of the library, of knowledge at rest, preserved in the cool, dry air of the night. Further downstream, where the river widens, a flock of geese sleeps on a sandbar. They are huddled together, heads tucked under wings, a mass of soft gray and white feathers. They are the birds of the Nile, their calls usually loud and raucous, but now they are silent. The sandbar is an island of safety surrounded by the dark water. The current moves around it, dividing and rejoining with a soft rushing sound. The air is damp and cool.
A single goose shifts its weight, settling deeper into the sand. The warmth of the flock rises into the cool air, a small, invisible cloud of life in the vastness of the river. They drift on the earth, carried by the rotation of the planet, sleeping as the water flows endlessly past their resting place. The sleeper in the bed feels the heaviness of the hour. The night has reached its deepest point, the nadir before the slow climb toward dawn. The body is completely relaxed, sinking into the support of the mattress. The breathing is shallow and slow. The mind has let go of the tether of the day, drifting in the dark, warm waters of sleep. The silence of the room is a physical presence, a soft weight that presses gently against the ears. The house is still, the village is still, the valley is still. The only movement is the slow, steady beat of the heart and the eternal flow of the river outside, moving through the darkness, carrying the dreams of the world toward the morning.
In the dense thickets of papyrus that line the marshlands, the air is still and heavy with moisture. The tall green stalks stand close together, creating a wall of vegetation that blocks the faint light of the stars. Deep within this green labyrinth, the silence is thick and muffled. The water at the roots of the plants is stagnant and black, undisturbed by any current. It holds the reflection of the reeds in perfect dark symmetry. Small water birds are tucked into the safety of the thicket, their feathers puffed against the damp chill. They do not move. The only sound is the occasional settling of a stalk, a soft, dry rustle that is swallowed instantly by the humid air. The smell here is of rich decay and vibrant growth, the ancient earthy scent of the primeval swamp from which the world was believed to have risen. High on the limestone cliffs that border the valley, the wind finds no resistance. It moves over the face of the rock with a low, hollowing sound. These cliffs are the walls of the world, marking the end of the life of the river and the beginning of the endless desert. In the deep fissures of the rock, the shadows are absolute. The stone retains a memory of the day's heat, radiating a very faint warmth into the cooling night air. High up on a ledge, a bird of prey sleeps with its head under its wing, a small dark shape against the pale stone. Below, the valley spreads out like a map of shadows, a ribbon of black and gray. The distance softens everything, turning the temples and the villages into small, insignificant shapes against the vastness of the land. In the courtyards of the weavers, the looms stand like skeletons in the dark. The wooden frames are still, holding the tension of the linen threads. A piece of cloth, half finished, is stretched tight, the weave paused in mid-pattern. In the dim light, the threads look like rays of moonlight captured and spun. The shuttle rests on the bench, smooth from the touch of the weaver's hand. The floor is covered in a fine layer of flax dust, soft and silent underfoot. The air smells of dry plant fibers and the wood of the loom. There is a sense of suspended rhythm here, a pause in the repetitive motion of the shuttle back and forth. The work waits for the light, patient and unfinished, resting in the cool silence of the workshop. Deep in the royal treasury, behind heavy cedar doors sealed with clay, the wealth of the kingdom lies in darkness. Gold rings, stacked in piles, do not glitter. Lapis lazuli and turquoise stones are dull and dark, their colors hidden by the night.
The air is linenless and dry, designed to protect the precious materials from time itself. There is no sound of commerce, no weighing of metal, no scratching of the scribe's pen. The objects exist only as heavy, solid shapes in the gloom. The dust on the floor is undisturbed, a record of the stillness that has reigned here since the doors were last closed. It is a stillness of accumulation, a quiet hoarding of the earth's treasures against the uncertainty of the future. On the flat roofs of the village houses, the families are sleeping under the open sky. They lie on woven mats, wrapped in linen sheets that have softened with age. The air up here is cleaner than in the narrow streets below, carrying the sweet breath of the north wind. The stars hang low over the rooftops, a canopy of diamonds that seems close enough to touch. A mother shifts in her sleep, pulling a child closer. The movement is slow and gentle, a ripple in the calm surface of the night. The sound of breathing is all around, a soft, collective rhythm that rises from the rooftops like a prayer. They are safe here, elevated above the ground, held in the cool embrace of the night air. The darkness is not empty, it is a protective cloak woven from the peace of the valley and the watchfulness of the gods. At the edge of the desert, where the sand meets the cultivation, a tamarisk tree stands alone. Its feathery branches droop toward the ground, heavy with dew. The tree is a silhouette against the stars, a lace-like pattern of black on dark blue. The ground beneath it is dry and sandy, sheltered by the canopy. A desert fox pauses in the shadow of the trunk, its large ears twitching. It listens to the silence. There is no prey moving nearby. The fox sits, wrapping its tail around its paws, becoming part of the stillness. The boundary between the desert and the sown land is sharp here, a line drawn by the reach of the river. To one side, the dark, wet earth of the fields. To the other, the pale, dry drift of the sand. The tree stands at the gate between these two worlds, drinking from the deep groundwater, watching the night drift by. The river continues its journey, a massive, silent force moving through the center of the darkness. It carries the reflection of the stars on its back, a second sky flowing toward the sea. The water is deep and cold. Far below the surface, the great fish hang suspended in the current, their fins moving slowly to hold their place. They do not see the stars. They know only the dark, heavy pressure of the water. The riverbed is soft mud, layered with the history of the valley. The flow is constant, a heartbeat that never stops. It moves past the sleeping temples, past the silent fields, past the resting people. It is the timekeeper of the civilization, measuring out the night in gallons of silence, carrying the valley gently, inevitably, toward the morning.
In the shadow of the great mud brick granaries, the air is dry and smells faintly of dust and golden wheat. These massive domed structures stand in rows, their walls thick enough to keep the interior cool even during the scorching days. Now, in the depths of the night, they are silent vaults of sustenance. Inside, the grain lies in steep, shifting mounds, millions of kernels of emmer and barley harvested from the black earth. There is a sense of immense stored energy here, a sleeping potential that will feed the city in the months to come. A temple cat, the guardian of the grain, sits perfectly still on top of a perimeter wall. Its silhouette is cut sharply against the stars. It watches the darkness with luminous eyes,
a silent sentinel protecting the harvest. The only sound is the wind moving softly over the curved roofs, a low, hollow whistle that speaks of the vastness of the food stores and the security of the kingdom. Beyond the granaries, in the open-air pens of the sacred cattle estates, the sacred cattle are resting. They lie in the straw, their heavy bodies radiating a gentle, living warmth that pushes back the chill of the night. These are the prize oxen with wide lyre-shaped horns that gleam dully in the starlight. Their breathing is a slow, rhythmic chorus, a deep, resonant sound that vibrates in the cool air. Occasionally, a beast shifts its weight, the straw rustling beneath it, or exhales a long breath that fogs briefly in the cold. The smell here is earthy and rich, the scent of animals and hay. It is a comforting primal scent, grounding the listener in the simple biological reality of life. The cattle do not worry about the sunrise or the flood. They exist entirely in the present moment of rest, heavy and content in the safety of the dark. Near the riverbank, where the clay is harvested for pottery, the ground is slick and cool. The pits where the earth has been dug out are filled with shadows, like pools of ink. Beside them, the potter's wheel stands idle, a wooden disc balanced on a stone pivot. A mound of raw clay sits on a workbench, covered with a wet cloth to keep it pliable. It waits for the morning and the hands of the maker. In the silence, the clay feels heavy and dormant, a piece of the riverbed brought up to the air. The tools of the trade, smooth stones, wooden paddles, cutting strings, are laid out in precise order. The workshop is a place of suspended animation where the act of creation has paused. The dust of dried clay coats the floor, softening the footsteps of the night wind as it wanders through the open door. In the courtyards of the scribal schools, the limestone seats are empty. The young students have long since returned to their homes, leaving the space to the quiet. The floor is scattered with practice stones, flakes of white limestone covered in tentative ink strokes. They lie in the dust like fallen leaves, bearing the clumsy hieroglyphs of beginners. In the moonlight, the black ink looks like shadows trapped on the stone. The air is still, undisturbed by the recitation of texts or the scratching of reed pens. There is a feeling of patience here, of knowledge waiting to be picked up again. The wisdom of the ancestors written on the walls watches over the empty courtyard. The carved figures of scribes and gods stand in the gloom, their hands raised in eternal gestures of instruction and blessing, silent teachers in the school of the night. High above the valley, the Milky Way stretches across the sky like a celestial river, mirroring the Nile below. The ancient Egyptians called this the winding waterway, a path for the souls and the gods. It is bright and dense with stars, a band of diamond dust thrown across the velvet black. The connection between the sky and the earth feels tangible in this hour. The stars are not distant points of fire, but lamps hanging from the body of the goddess Nut, who arches over the world to protect it. The light they cast is cold and serene, washing the valley in a pale silver glow. It touches the tops of the palm trees, the roofs of the temples, and the surface of the water with the same impartial grace. The universe feels orderly and vast, a clockwork mechanism of light and silence, turning slowly on its axis. The sleeper in the room feels this cosmic order as a deep sense of peace. The world is holding its breath. The worries of the day have dissolved into the shadows, leaving only the sensation of rest. The body feels heavy, sinking into the support of the bed, as if into the soft mud of the riverbank. The darkness is a soft weight on the eyelids. The mind drifts untethered, floating on the slow current of the night. There is no urgency, no destination. There is only the flow. The river moves endlessly towards the sea. The stars move endlessly towards the west, and the sleeper moves deeper into the comforting restoration of the dreamless dark. The silence is a blanket woven thick and warm, wrapping the soul in safety until the first gray light of dawn begins to touch the horizon.
In the sheltered enclosure of a vineyard, the heavy clusters of grapes hang motionless beneath a canopy of leaves. The vines are old, their twisted wood gnarled and thick, anchoring the plants deep into the soil. In the darkness, the leaves form a dense, rustling ceiling that traps the cool air against the ground. The smell here is sweet and rich, the scent of fruit ripening in the dark, mixed with the damp, mineral odor of the irrigated earth. The grapes themselves are cool to the touch, swollen with the memory of the sun, but resting now in the shadows. They are dusted with a fine, pale bloom that catches the faint starlight filtering through the foliage. There is no sound of harvesting, no baskets being filled. The vineyard is a place of silent growth, where the sugar in the fruit concentrates slowly in the quiet hours, waiting for the proper moment of perfection. Deep within the stone recesses of the temple, a water clock marks the passage of the night with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. It is a simple vessel of alabaster, filled at sunset, with a tiny hole at the base that allows the water to escape, drop by single drop. In the profound silence of the sanctuary, the sound of the dripping water is the only heartbeat. It falls into a basin below, a liquid counting of the hours. A priest sits nearby in the gloom, his head bowed in meditation. He does not need to watch the level of the water to know that the night is turning. He feels the time in the coolness of the stone floor and the settling of the air. This measurement of time is fluid and gentle, a reminder that the night is not empty, but a flowing stream that carries the world from one day to the next without haste. On the high plateau where the desert wind meets the stone, the silence is vast and dry. Here, the landscape is stripped of all softness. The limestone rocks are sharp and pale, scattered across the ground like bones of the earth. The wind moves through the canyons with a low, hollowing sound, polishing the stone surfaces over millennia. There is no humidity here to soften the edges of the shadows. The line between the rock and the sky is stark and clear. A desert hare, small and alert, pauses in the lee of a boulder, its long ears twitching to catch the sound of the wind. It is perfectly camouflaged against the sand, a creature of the stillness. The desert stretches out behind it, an ocean of silence that has no shore, reaching all the way to the lands of the setting sun. Down by the muddy banks of the river, the papyrus reeds stand tall and still. They are a wall of green darkness, their feathery heads motionless in the calm air. The water at their roots is black and stagnant, holding the reflection of the stalks in a perfect inverted mirror. Small water birds are tucked deep inside the thicket, sleeping in nests woven from the reeds themselves. They are hidden from the eyes of the night predators, safe in the dense vegetation. The air here is thick with the smell of wet mud and green life, a humid, heavy scent that clings to the skin. The mist that rises from the river is beginning to thicken, curling around the stems of the papyrus like white smoke, blurring the boundaries between the water and the land.
In the workshop of a weaver, the loom stands silent in the corner. A piece of fine linen, half finished, is stretched tight on the frame. In the dim light, the fabric glows with a ghostly whiteness. The threads are even and fine, spun by hands that know the feel of the flax. The shuttle rests on the wooden bench, its work paused. The room smells of dry plant fibers and the wood of the loom. Dust motes dance slowly in the air, settling gently on the floor. There is a sense of suspended industry here, a pause in the creation of the cloth that wraps the living and the dead. The silence of the room is the silence of patience, the quiet that exists between the movement of the hand and the finished work. The sleeper in the bed turns slowly, adjusting the sheet against the cooling air. The night has reached its coldest point, the hour of the wolf, when the world is most still. The blankets feel heavy and protective, a warm weight that anchors the body to rest. The breathing is deep and regular, a soft rhythm that matches the flow of the river outside. The mind has let go of all thoughts, drifting in a space that is neither awake nor asleep, but simply present. The darkness is not a void, but a substance, soft and velvet, that fills the room and cushions the senses. The heart beats slow and steady. The night holds the house in its palm, safe and secure, while the river flows on through the valley, dark and deep and endless.
As the great wheel of the sky completes its final turn, the darkness begins to thin along the eastern horizon. A faint ribbon of violet light appears above the Red Sea hills, separating the earth from the stars. The air changes one last time, losing the heavy stillness of the deep night and taking on the fresh, trembling expectancy of the morning. The birds in the marshes stir, shaking the dew from their wings. The Nile, which has flowed black and silent through the hours of darkness, begins to catch the first gray reflection of the coming day. The cycle is closing. The sun god is preparing to step once more into his bark, bringing the gift of life back to the valley. The ancient sleepers, safe in their mud-brick homes, are on the verge of waking, ready to begin the rhythm of their lives all over again. We leave them here, suspended in this perfect moment between the dream and the dawn. But as we step back from the banks of the Nile and return to our own time, we carry with us the quiet wisdom of their days. In a world that often feels rushed and fragmented, the people of the valley remind us of the power of rhythm and patience. They teach us that there is a sacredness in the simple acts of living, in the breaking of bread, the drawing of water, and the work of our hands. They show us that life is not a race to be won, but a river to be navigated, flowing with a purpose that is both individual and universal. We learn from them that rest is not a waste of time, but a necessary return to the source, a deepening of the roots that allows us to stand strong against the winds of the day. Perhaps we can bring a piece of this ancient silence into our own modern lives. We can choose to move a little slower, to breathe a little deeper, and to see the eternal in the ordinary. We can find our own rituals in the morning coffee or the evening walk, treating them with the same reverence the scribe held for his ink or the farmer for his seed. We can remember that, like the stones of the temple, we are built to endure, and like the river, we are made to flow. The peace we found in the dark valley is not lost. It is a stillness we can carry within us, a sanctuary we can enter whenever the noise of the world becomes too loud. If this journey into the past has brought a measure of calm to your night, and if you wish to travel with us again to other times and other quiet places, you are welcome to remain part of this community. A gentle touch on the subscribe button ensures that the path back to history is always open to you. If this story offered you rest, leaving a like is a quiet way to share that peace with others who are searching for sleep. And I would love to read your thoughts in the comments, perhaps sharing what lesson from the ancient world you wish to keep, or simply letting us know that you have found your rest. Now the light is returning to the ancient land, but your time for sleep remains. Let the heavy curtain of the past fall gently back into place. The river flows on, silent and eternal. The desert holds its secrets in the golden sands. You are safe, you are rested, and you are part of the great, timeless story of humanity. Close your eyes and let the final shadows wrap around you like warm linen and drift away into the deep, healing silence of your own dreams. Good night.